lots of new faces and some familiar names and some familiar faces too. It's always interesting to see who we're gonna get for this one at the beginning of the year and see who thinks they need to brush up and who feels comfortable or not. But we also know that there's lots of people out there that probably can't make it today, and so we'll record this, and so it's available to you later on, or them, everybody basically, as we go forward. Right from the start, I think it's best to kind of get this out there. There's really, I think the biggest reason we do this is to kind of introduce ourselves as far as statewide assessment staff and who you might be working with, but also to tell you where your resources are. And the biggest thing is, if you can't find what you're looking for, contact us and let us know. You are never a burden on us. Answering your questions is what we do. And so never feel like you have to wait to ask a question. Feel like you can do so at any time, because there's a lot of information, obviously, and a lot of responsibility as a DAC, and that changes from district to district all the time. So if you have questions, please let us know. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing to let you know about is that this is we're recording the first session right now. And then the other sessions for DAC 101, which we affectionately call it, are already recorded and out there for you. As you can see, ACT was a little longer than everybody else. That's to be expected, just because it's kind of its own piece all unto itself. The other pieces we kind of want to let you know about, the different supports that we try to provide to different districts, and that might be something that you're already taking part in, or that you might have to do at some point in the future. Yeah. Objectives, just kind of, like I said, give everybody some context. Where are we coming from? Who are we? Why do we make the decisions we make? Kind of get into that a little bit. Really just to cover this overview of all the supports we provide. We've really gone out and tried to do additional pieces around balanced assessment, and those supports are there for districts, but some of them will work for some districts and not for others. So just examine the overview of the DAC, the District Assessment Contact. It's one of the most important roles that we have from statewide assessment perspective, is to communicate with districts, right? There's 244 districts. There's one DAC in every district. No matter the size of the district, there's only one DAC, and then districts kind of decide how that information is going to go out from there. And we encourage district leadership teams to have that conversation. I would encourage them to have that conversation once a year, to say, here's how the information is going to come to the DAC, and this is how it's going to go out to other people in the district. Make sure everybody's kind of clear on that, and that expectation is clear. And like I said, the last thing is to review those program resources and the contacts. Who can you reach out to? There's lots of different pieces. So who are the best people to reach out to if you do have those questions? I thought this was important as well to kind of give you a statewide assessment philosophy. Where are we coming from, right? So most of us at the department are educators and have been educators for a long time. We're very concerned about serving the students and educators in the state of Nebraska, right? So most of us came here to do that, to serve in that way. The other thing is to make laws and policies be the most beneficial and the least disruptive as possible. Sometimes that doesn't mean it's not disruptive at all. I mean, can be very disruptive still, but really trying to make sure that we're following the law, but also doing the best we can for you. Offer resources and supports, like I said, about balanced assessment. The Department of Education cannot create a balanced assessment system. We have local control and lots of decisions are made at the district level. What we try to do is provide supports for the balanced assessment system and then let you pick and choose which things work for you. And then the last thing is we're trying to fulfill the mission and vision of the State Board of Education and NDE. So as they give us things to think about or to do, we're obviously trying to continually fulfill that mission as we move forward as well. So this is kind of what goes into decision making for us, right? And so this is where we start, is what is best for all students. I know that that not all the students are the same, but trying to make the best decision we can for that. Also about fairness and equity, right? So one district or one school should not be significantly different than another about how they're treated and how tests are done. And so we try to be very consistent in the way that we make decisions because of fairness and equity, because these scores are going to be reported, there's going to be accountability decisions. So as we make decisions, we're trying to make sure that we ensure those pieces. Also technical quality for our assessments. Statewide assessments have to go through it's kind of a continuous school improvement process, right? Where we turn in our information about the technical quality of our assessments to the US Department of Education. They give us feedback on how we could do that better. And that might be in security, it might be in accessibility, it might be in any number of different areas that we need to continue to improve on. That being said, our assessments are of very high technical quality. They have to be. And so if you ever want to read that technical manual, it is big at the end of the year, and it kind of covers everything that we do to try to make sure we have high quality assessments. That goes from how we train teachers to write items or review items, all the way through making sure that it's valid and reliable in the way that we intended it to be. And the last thing is, obviously, we have to make decisions based on federal and state statute or guidance, right? It is the reason we do statewide assessments is because it's mandated in law. And so we're trying to make sure that we are following those pieces as well. This is something that I include with every time I do any basic information about the purpose of, or the originations of statewide assessment. These 4 reasons are what's actually listed in the law, right? So when the law was written, these 4 bullet points here are what they said was the purpose of summative assessment. And you'll notice that there's not a whole lot about instructional improvement or helping students grow. It was really about accountability and comparisons. And that's the origin of all of that summative pieces, and how we designed the original NISA tests and NSCAS tests. Where we've been going here lately is to try to think about bigger picture things, right? If you look at the NSCAS growth and balanced assessment, since about 2017, we really have turned our focus to be not only about that summative piece that we have to do, but also what other kinds of supports can we put out there. We know that formative assessment is where all of the good stuff happens. And so we want to be able to support good instructional, high quality instructional materials, good formative assessment in the classroom. And so if we can do more around those pieces and support those pieces as well, we want to make sure we do that. And I forgot to ask my team to do this, or any one person. So if you guys would drop some links in when we talk about these, because we didn't send out the PowerPoint ahead of time, but statewide assessment contacts, we have all of our contact information on one page. So everybody that I'm going to go through here today is really on this page. So you should be able to find them fairly easily. And so That is the location. And so the first thing we're going to do is kind of go through our staff. So myself as the director, if you have questions about policy level things, results use, testing irregularities, which includes security and accessibility questions, I can answer most of those questions most of the time. I can answer other questions as too, but the further I am away from specific programs, the less I'm likely to know specific details. And so Dr. Trudy Clark, obviously as our assistant director, has a lot of the same expertise areas, but I would also include formative assessments. Trudy's doing a lot of the work around the formative assessment network. And so she is our expert as far as formative assessments, and those questions should go to her because she's done the most work with it most recently. Maggie Sis is our program director, and really she is, I told her the other day I was gonna rename her position as the Queen of Data. I don't know, that it would probably be more appropriate because Maggie takes care of all things data related. If it's an advisor or how to get things into where it needs to be, or clean data on the backside of when we are gonna report results, Maggie's doing a lot of work on everybody's behalf to try to make sure that data is as clean as possible and is as accurate as possible. So if you have questions in that area, Maggie's going to be the one that can answer your questions most of the time the quickest. Then Iris Owens. Iris is wonderful. Hey, Iris. Iris is an ACT employee. But she works out of our office when we have an office. Someday we'll be back in the office and they'll have that all done and completed, hopefully sooner than later. But Iris is our ACT expert. The first place you want to go if you have ACT questions is to Iris, because there's a lot of information there that I specifically have not learned, so I can't and won't answer your questions about it. So Iris has that deep knowledge, and if she can't find the answer to it, she has people in ACT that she can reach out to and find the answer. So that's where you want to start there. Rhonda True. Rhonda is our grants manager. We just actually found out that this is our third enhanced assessment grant that we've just received, and Rhonda's been our director of those enhanced assessment grants. A lot of the science work that we have done in the state beyond the summative piece have been because of this additional grants that we've been awarded. And so she has a lot of knowledge about our science assessment, but also those grants and the resources those grants have produced. And so if you're looking for science information about assessment, specifically Rhonda True is available. Of course, we also have content experts in our teaching and learning partnerships as well. Polly is our NAEP coordinator. They just dropped some NAEP results here in the last couple of days. You probably have seen some results about that and about how much scores have dropped because of the pandemic. But if you get chosen for NAEP, the national report card, know that Polly's going to be your main contact for that. Stacy Weber's our admin assistant, and she takes care of most of the dealing out of information, right? So if you call or email our direct lines, she's going to send that information out to other people that can answer that question for you, but she's going to have a lot of information about events and the logistics as well. So if we have a webinar, she's probably going to be the one to ask about those types of things and be able to help you out with contracts and those types of events. If you have teachers that are working for us, for instance, we haven't done as much of that in the last couple of years because any additional disruption to your school year is obviously probably not real welcome with the pandemic and everything. But I imagine as we continue to come out of the pandemic that we might have more one-off types of situations where we get information from your teachers directly to help us make decisions. Allie Martinez Wilkinson. Allie is a NWA employee, but works out of our office as well. And she's really does a lot of the work around our certified facilitator program, which includes professional learning, formative assessments, and general NWA questions. She's going to be good at all of those things and probably a whole lot more. But definitely the professional learning, the certified facilitator work is where her expertise lies. So the last one, well, I shouldn't say the last one. So on our contact page are also vendor customer service. We have 3 major vendors for NSCAS, a 4th if you include Elpa, right? And so if it's technology or how to use their software, we recommend the best place to go is directly to their customer service. They have large contracts, they have customer service that are staffed every business day. They can get to you pretty quickly most of the time. And once again, it's their software. And so they're going to be better at answering technology questions related to that. Couple other people that I wanted to introduce that do work alongside us at the statewide assessment and the statewide assessment office. Sharon Heater is from our special education office, and she does a ton of work with us around on the alternate assessment, but also on accessibility. And so a lot of times she's a great person to talk to if you have questions about accessibility concerns. And really has a wealth of knowledge about what that looks like in the classrooms, and can really help a lot in answering those questions as well. So accessibility there. And then Allison Olson Dinbesti is our director of Elpa 21. So Allison, actually, this is the one test, right? So we kind of group NSCAS in with, or Elpa 21 in with all of the other NSCAS, including security agreements and those pieces. But Allison really takes care of directing that piece. And so we've tried to make things as seamless as possible between the 2 areas. I imagine there's more work that we could do as we go forward to try to make those things as similar as possible. But at the end of the day, there's 2 different, it's another test and it has another system. And then also this comes up all the time, right? So assessment and accountability are often grouped together. Oftentimes you're better off going to the accountability people if you have accountability questions. They use our assessment data to make accountability decisions and accountability calculations. And so they can best answer those questions around that. So Lane Carr, who was the previous accountability director, is now in the commissioner's office, and he's the administrator over office policy and strategic initiatives. But he is still doing a lot of the work right now in this transition. So Vicky is new, she just started, and so she'll be able to answer some basic questions, but she's going to be getting up to speed. Right now they are using the other people in the department, right, are using assessment scores from last year to do this accountability work that is going to be coming out with the public release at the end of September or the beginning of October. And the last one here, again, here is our website, and then that's just the main page there. But these are our general information too. If you don't know who else to email, you can always email the generic one there or the phone call there, and we'll get those questions sent to the right person. And so that's always a possibility. The other thing that I recommend right now, especially because the office is not done and we're going to be moving back into the office, is sending emails. When you send an email, send it to multiple people. If you want to include a couple, that's always a good idea. If I'm busy someplace else, Trudy can answer it or somebody else can answer it quicker. So oftentimes including it more than one of us is just going to get you the answer faster. So here's a little bit about communication and how communication works with district assessment context. That some of you already know this because you're doing it, or that you've been a part of. Some other DAC has sent that information to you. But so, like I said, there's only one DAC per district. We only allow one DAC per district, and then we ask you, the districts, to determine how they're going to send that out. So a couple things to mention about this. We have all types of different DACs, right? So I have superintendents that are DACs. We have principals that are DACs. We have high school principals that are DACs. We have elementary principals that are DACs. We have DACs that are classroom teachers, counselors, just about any role that you could think of. In our 244 districts, there's a lot of different variety in that. So figuring out how you want to communicate is really important, how that's going to be done. In some cases, they take our DAC update emails and only send that information, part of that information, out to people who need it. In some cases, they just forward it to everybody on their leadership team every time they get that email. And so it's everybody's kind of shared responsibility. Just know that when we call, we're going to call you to start out with. And if there's somebody better to go to, then we can definitely do that. This decision was made early on to try not to have a big list that was ever evolving with the DACs, because it was much easier to know who the DAC was and then know who was responsible, as opposed to trying to have 10 people at OPS that we're trying to contact and who's going to be the best person to do that. And so we've kind of kept that model ever since. Any emails, so our DAC updates, we basically send these whenever we need to, right? So there's not a specific cadence. Is there enough information that this needs to go out? Sometimes that might be one today and one tomorrow. Sometimes it might be one today and one next month. Very rarely, we try not to ever send two in one day if we can help it, unless we think there's a really good reason for that. So there was a time last spring that I sent 3 separate emails about 3 different things because they were so meaty that I thought that was better to do that way. So in general, like my predecessor said, if you get an email from us, please pay attention to us, because we're important, right? But I also know that you get all kinds of emails all the time, right? Bi-weekly updates. So NWA, when we started working with NWA, we started doing bi-weekly updates, and that's just to kind of update that information as we go. I think it's really important now that we're moving to NSCAS growth, and we have windows, or at least optional windows, in the fall and the winter. But those bi-weekly updates really put things front and center. We've also taken a lot of feedback about these things, and they oftentimes, the DACs tell us, send us reminders, send us more instead of less. So that's what that's where we try to err, is sending more than not. There's also this document. Somebody could put that contact at a glance in there. I mentioned Maggie before. Maggie's wonderful about putting everything together, and whether it's a database or in a spreadsheet or whatever. And so she took everything and put it in one pager that if you want to print that off and tack it on something or whatever, that's available for you, or just have it so you can pull it up very easily. A lot of that information is right on our webpage as well. So I just went ahead and threw these in here. You've probably seen all of these dates before, but I thought, well, they'll be here available again in this presentation. So the Elpa 21 test window for this year. So any English language learners, would need to take the Elpa 21 test in this window, right? So this is K through 12. Any students that are not English language proficient have to take this test. So ACT window, just real quick, you have a choice between test window 1 and test window 2. Test window 3 is a makeup window. And so you can do test window 1, and then you would have test window 2 and 3 to make it up. You could choose test window 2, and then you would have test window 3 to make it up. Know that we expect every opportunity that you can to test a student that missed, we expect you to try to do that, right? So if you tested the first window, we would expect you to try to get those kids in the second window. And then if you didn't get them in the second window, we would expect you to try to get them in the third window. And most people get this because 0 scores are really killer on average. It just doesn't go very well, right? So when you put all of those pieces together. So the NSCAS general and alternate window for the spring is April 3rd through May 12th. Don't wait till the final week to test. I can't express that enough. If there are blizzards and you waited to the last week to do test and you don't get that tested, then there's nothing I can do about that, right? I mean, there's no, most of the time there's not another window, there's not something else we can do unless it's, pretty significant. The flooding, we did some things with a couple years ago. The pandemic, obviously, we canceled all testing. But in generally speaking, do not wait till the end of that window because we can't really help you if you don't get this testing done within the window. Optional windows for NSCAS growth this fall and this winter. NSCAS growth for this fall is going really fairly well. There's over 20,000 tests in the system already. I believe that was yesterday on the 1st. We're still looking for quite a bit more participation to get the data we need. So we're going to keep an eye on that as we go. The same thing for winter, right? So we have this other window in winter. Once again, we're looking for participants, and hopefully some of you are doing that to be able to calculate new data as we go forward. What is typical growth from fall to spring? What is typical growth from fall to winter, and those types of things? And so being able to give growth metrics around that are one of the reasons why we need additional information moving forward, additional participation moving forward. So NSCAS data, and talking to this a little bit here, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to check your data. Obviously, the bigger district you are, the harder that is to do, right? If you're a fairly small district, it can take you literally a couple of minutes to look over your rosters and go, yep, those are our kids, and now I'm done checking that roster. If you're bigger, then you might have processes with spreadsheets and data people that you are looking at that information too. Yeah, that's the Dac Management Checklist. Once again, that's a resource that Maggie put together and said, these are most of the things that have to be done in the year. So you can kind of see those things that we're going to ask you during specific times. Know that you don't have to worry about any of those until you see something specific from us that comes to you. You'll get directions for anything we need you to do, right? So you don't have to say, oh, that says mid-September and I haven't heard anything about it. Don't worry about it until you get that from us, right? In that DAC email, we'll have a new directions on specifically how to do that thing. We'll also be looking at rostering this year is a little bit different because of how we're pulling information over from map growth. We're going to be looking at making how we can help districts ensure they've tested all the students that they're supposed to. And we'll have more about that later in the year as we get closer to that time towards spring. Okay, so now we're going to get into specifically NSCAS General and NSCAS Alternate. Once again, very high level, right? So some of you have already participated in other trainings that go way deeper than this. But oftentimes I think starting at the big picture is pretty helpful oftentimes, right? So NSCAS assessments, we have 3 major vendors for NSCAS. NSCAS General is supported by NWEA, NSCAS Alternate DRC, and NSCAS ACT, obviously ACT supports us in that. Those were all done through requests for proposals at one time or another anyway. So that happens, and then Elpa 21, and I'm not going to remember, Allison, I'm not going to remember who Elpa 21's vendor is, and so you could come off mute, or you can remind me.
It is Cambium Assessments.
Cambium Assessments, sorry, I should have known that. Should have probably put it on there. And then these are our tested grades, right? Once again, most people know this. ELA and mathematics grades 3 through 8, and then once in high school, and then science grade 5, 8, and once in high school. The big thing here, and you'll obviously you see it in this in red, and this is the thing that often gets by most people if they aren't involved in it directly, is most people think we test juniors. We don't. We actually test 3rd-year cohort students. So quite a while ago, the federal government changed it from a grade level to a cohort. And so when a student becomes a freshman, when the first time they become a freshman, it's expected that that student tests in their 3rd year after being enrolled as a freshman, okay? That doesn't matter how many credits the student has. If they have earned no credits in high school, they are still expected to take the junior test or the high school test, even though they're not a junior. If they are a senior because they took extra credits or whatever, that's still 3rd year, right? So basically, unless a student is graduated, their 3rd year in high school is where they take this test. And that's where it throws a lot of people off, because they're like, oh, that student's a sophomore. Why would they need to test? Well, depends when they were a freshman first, right? With high mobility, sometimes you don't know, when that student necessarily started, but that cohort is the thing that's going to tell you whether they need to test or not. So just a little bit more about balanced assessment. So we offer several different pieces, and this is what some of the other videos are about. NSCAS assessments, or the summative assessments, are obviously the required part of this, right? So everybody has to participate in the summative assessment or map growth in the future as we go that direction, because it's serving as the summative test. We also this year was we slowed down a little bit and made interim map growth available to districts once again this year. Not everybody was ready to go at the speed that we were trying to go, and I think that putting some choice back in there was probably a wise decision as we did this. Know that we're still moving towards this. This is still our goal to have this 3-year design in place, and we'll have more about where we are as we go forward in the coming months. One of the things about making them optional is there's data that we're trying to get a hold of so that we can do more of the calculations that districts want, and so that participation is really key to allowing us to do those additional pieces. I mentioned earlier formative assessment. Formative assessment supports network. This is a brand new support that we're doing, and we have a group of districts that are kind of piloting this work right now, or what we've called early adopters. And basically they're trying to take coaching models and taking coaching models and improving those coaching models with formative assessment practices. once again, you might have coaches that know how to do that or whatever, but they might not. And so how can we increase that assessment literacy and that additional piece for improved classroom outcomes? Then professional learning, I mentioned Allie earlier, right? So the Certified Facilitator program, we have 72 certified facilitators across the state. Every one of our ESUs has a certified facilitator. Almost all of our large districts have one or more certified facilitators. And they are really given a lot of access to a lot of resources, and then they're able to use those as they need to. And that looks very different from district to district and from ESU to ESU, right? And so we try to make sure that somebody is supported in using new NSCAS growth reports, and then have that information to be able to share with your teachers as they move forward. Okay, so kind of go back to big picture NSCAS general here, right? I said the partners NWEA. This happened last year that we got a different platform for NSCAS than we currently use for map growth. That continues to be the case, right? So we have map growth side of things and then NSCAS side of things. It's a password protected user rights system. So oftentimes the DAC gets access, and then we'll have control over who else has access. Because that is a rollover from year to year, your previous people are going to be rolled over. So you might have to delete people or add new people as the year starts. Districts, and this changed this year as well, is districts provide rosters into map growth, and then that information is shared over to NSCAS growth general. Know that when NDE makes accountability and public reporting decisions, we're looking at a subset of whoever you're going to test, right? So we are only going to look at students that are in the specific grades. So in grades 3 through 8, and that once in high school for that third year cohort, we're going to be looking at students that have above a 51% or 51% or more of an FTP, right? So if you have a student that is served by a parochial school and you serve that student, say, for their special education time, if it's 1 period a day, so you got like a 0.1 or 0.2 FTE, that student is not going to be publicly reported or used in your accountability determinations, but you might want to give them NSCAS growth so you have information. Also, alternate assessment flag. So each of your districts uses some means to collect special education data. We look for the alternate assessment flag. So this is for students with IEPs specifically. If they have an alternate assessment flag, then we know they're in that 1% of students that is typically assessed by alternate. And we'll get into more of that in a minute or two. But those are the pieces that we're kind of using to say, okay, these are the kids that we expect to test. NDE, like I said before, is working on it. It used to be that NDE provided the roster and said, this is who we expect. So that's changing a little bit this year. Very conscientious about that. Districts being surprised by a student that they didn't know they were responsible for is a big problem. So NDE is working on different ways to help you know that you've actually tested all of the kids that you're supposed to. So be on the lookout for that. NSCAS growth, or the summative, the students testing platform, like I said, is different than map growth. And so there's 2 lockdown browsers. You can find information for your IT people at the address there. That's the portal page, NWA's portal page. And that's where they put a lot of the additional information that we use for administering NSCAS general tests, both NSCAS growth and NSCAS science. We're not going to read this here really quick, but know that NSCAS general and NSCAS alternate use the same basic 3 achievement levels, right? So all students would be placed into one of these 3 achievement levels, whether they're use the alternate test or the general test. And notice specifically that we have changed that top level from college and career ready to advanced. It just says advanced. So hopefully that will translate easier to parents. Notice that whole definition is really a part of what that is, but we know that oftentimes things get distilled down to advanced, on track, developing, and is a lot harder for people to understand when they don't see the whole definition. We also put a content support page specifically for assessment. These are linked to NDE's page. There's an English language arts, mathematics, and science. Each of them have resources to help your teachers, right? So they're going to have a blueprint or a table of specifications that say these are the standards that we test on the state assessment. Here are the achievement level descriptors, and so they describe those standards at each of the levels, right? Developing, on track, and advanced. And then there's going to be sample questions, either sample questions for you to use, or in the science, there's actually some really great classroom formative task repositories that we have made, some tasks that you can use in your classroom to kind of get a good idea whether students are making progress or not. And so they're designed in much the same way as the tasks are for the science summative. So good resources there for your teachers to be using. And anytime that any of these things get updated, we let you know that as well, so that you know that the new table of specifications is out, because we've changed standards, and so we have a new version of that. So NSCAS growth, real quick, there's lots of information on NSCAS growth out there. So if somebody should put that one in the resources as well. We produced all kinds of resources around NSCAS growth last year. We'll be updating much of that. Know that it is aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Ready standards. It includes multiple choice and technology enhanced items. It is computer adaptive, right? So just like map growth, NSCAS growth gets harder or easier based on how students do. So it's really trying to find where students are, and it can go off grade level. When it has enough information, it can go off below or above grade level to where students are, to try to figure out how they've grown as well. It is untimed single session, but can be divided into multiple sessions. One thing we try to always do is have scheduling guidance out there, so we can give you the most up-to-date information about scheduling. The other thing you can do is look to last year's results. Oftentimes there's timing results, and so sometimes those are the best places for you to get information from. And sometimes individual teachers and what they do will have impacts on how much time that it takes as well. So kind of consider all of that as you're making schedules and make them the best you can. So NSCAS General Science, right? We did this test operational for the first time this last spring in 2022. We test grades 5 and 8. Those standards or cut scores have just been released. We are working on a special webinar where we get into interpreting this. And that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks to kind of help support those new results, and kind of explain why they look the way the decisions behind the way they look, and to answer questions related to that whole piece. So general results, right, are publicly reported at the district and school level, and those results feeding to the accountability system. So that's how those are used. And so we'll talk about NSCAS interim for a little bit here. We won't not talk about it very much. When we did this whole thing with NSCAS and the state contract, we were making map growth available to districts. And so we just, it is the same thing. NSCAS interim map growth is the same thing, right? But ultimately, we plan on replacing that with NSCAS growth. So NSCAS interim or map growth is optional to districts. You get to choose when and how you do it, which grades you do it and how often they do it. It is computer adaptive. You get immediate results. Does have more information for teachers, schools, and districts, and rostering is a district responsibility. One other thing I'll mention here is the last couple of years, we've also provided, NDE has also provided access to K through 2 and 9-10 for map growth. That is continuing on this year and next year, and then that special contract runs out. So if you are planning on continuing K through 2 and 9-10 after the 23-24 school year, your district will have to pick up that cost again. Okay. And I'll keep saying that because there is no more money after that. That was a special one-time only deal for those grade levels that we got 3 years. So again, professional learning, I think I've already talked about this probably to some extent more than I should have before, but we have these 72 certified facilitators. They should be out there ready to help you around professional learning in your districts, right? So either there's somebody already in your district, or it might be you in some cases, are the certified facilitator, or there might be additional people that have those access as well. One thing I'll mention about the certified facilitator program is that all 72 certified facilitators can take an additional +1 with them to training. So oftentimes, if there's a training that you want to be included on, you should reach out to your either your local ESU and to their certified facilitators, or reach out to within your own district and say, hey, I'd like to go to this. Can you include me? NSCAS growth browser needs to be updated for fall, I believe. It should be set to do that automatically, depending on how your IT people have it set up. But I knew it did have to have an update for the fall. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, when we don't have a ton of time here, the NSCAS alternate summative, right? So the vendor partner for that is DRC. If you've been around for a while, you'll know that before NWA had our state contract, DRC had our state contract for both general and for alternate. They retained that contract for alternate. So they have a different system. Everything's different about it. They have their own test management, and so you have to have your own new credentials and passwords to get into all of those things. NDE will provide rosters in January to DRC. So any student with an alternate assessment flag based on grade level and FTE, we're going to send them. I'll tell you, this is one of the biggest things that gets probably overlooked by district, is that alternate assessment flag, and that the correct students are flagged or not. And so there's oftentimes a lot of fixing this information. A student won't have it marked or will have it marked, and it will be incorrect. So spending some time and trying to make sure with your special education folks that these are marked correctly is probably worth your time as far as that goes. So students and proctors, they access the testing software, Insight Lockdown Browser, very much like you've done with a lot of different programs over the years, right? So you're going to log in and enter that information to access the test. So this is really, really important. So alternate assessment is intended for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, right? And so and I can't say that enough. I try to say it over and over and over again, is it's really intended for a very small population of students, typically about 1% or less of the students in the state. And actually, at the state level, there is a 1% cap on that, right? And so, well under. I worked in a small district, and I'm well aware of the irony that one student sometimes is more than 1% of your population in grade and for kids that are tested. So oftentimes, if you have small numbers, that's just overlooked because there's just nothing you can do about it. But at the same time, it's really important that we're all using the same guidelines to determine who qualifies for the alternate assessment and who doesn't. So anytime you have questions for that, calling and letting our special education staff know is always a good thing to think about. If you don't understand the guidance that's out there, or if you have questions about it, asking is always a good thing to do. Like I said, federal guidelines allow for 1% of students to take that assessment. We have every year been trying to get below that 1%. We've had to have special waivers in the past. It sounds like they're just about out of patience with waivers anymore, and I'm trying to make sure that we get to that 1% as soon as possible. We do put out guidelines for eligibility. Somebody could throw those in there. They're also all attached to the NSCAS alternate summative page. Those have been out there for a while. Oftentimes we update those just to add clarity. They haven't changed a whole lot. So the alternate assessments, ELA, math, science, they all have extended indicators, right? So basically students that qualify for the alternate are not, do not have access to, or maybe have not been given access to the regular standards. They're oftentimes given access and taught the extended standards because they're in a life skills program, or that's the level that we think that they're going to be able to reach first before they can access those full standards. And so those extended standards are written by Nebraska teachers or vetted by Nebraska teachers. Try to say, is this a reasonable level? And then we share those out there. So making sure your teachers that have alternate students that qualify for alternate, right, they have access to those standards and those teaching resources that we put out there for them. So the test includes 3 answer options and multiple choice, right? So instead of the normal 4 for multiple choice, it only includes 3. Some other things, it's a one-on-one administration. So the proctor reads everything aloud that's scripted to be allowed, and the student listens to that on a one-on-one basis, right? So this test is given one adult, one teacher. They can either interact with a computer or paper pencil. The proctor has to enter the results at the end, and there is a recorded training for this to show proctors how to do this. And so it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit more individualized than anything else that we'll do, right? Because it's taking each of these students with significant cognitive disabilities and figuring out what needs to happen for them. In some cases, they'll cut the whole test apart and put it in pieces in front of the students. And sometimes they'll have touch pads that they're able to some students will be nonverbal and will have to communicate through other means, right? So it happens in a lot of different ways, usually very individualized. You don't receive this material anymore. You print this material off, and then you enter those responses. You could have a student that is non-responsive, right? So you could have a student that is unable to communicate with you when you give an item of the test, and they'll be non-responsive. There's a certain code you use for that. If you have questions about that, let us know. But basically the student is not interacting with the content, but you've tried to test them. So once again, this is the same slide I had earlier, is just to reiterate that we use the same achievement levels for both general and alternate, even though the alternate is to the extended indicators, right? So they're extended college and career indicators as opposed to the direct indicators from the standards themselves. These results are publicly reported. In most cases, we take alternate and general and put them together. Because the number of students is so small, it becomes really easy to identify these students if we pulled them out completely. And so and the federal guidelines say they have to be reported and all of these things. So they're often grouped within those general results with the alternate results. Oftentimes you can pull look at those results as subgroups if you have a large enough district. Our smaller districts, it's going to be one student in some cases, and so you're just not going to see that result public facing. That would be something you would get for district facing information, and would have to look there for those results. These results from the alternate do feed into the AQuest accountability system as well. Talk a little bit about the accessibility manual. So all students that participate in NSCAS either can do so with no accommodations or with accommodations, right? But all students have to participate. And so the accessibility manual is there to say, these are the tools that are available. The manual, I really believe that all of your special education teachers should read the manual from cover to cover. There is a shorter form that you can use to do IEP work and those types of things, but it's not something that I would, just using the short form by itself is not enough. They need to have that information about what's in the manual. One of the big things for me that I think DACs need to do is make sure they're communicating with their special education staff about accessibility, about alternate students and those types of things, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The last thing I'll say about well, there's another page there. So writing rules for every student in the state is really hard, right? So I could get a 100-page manual for you and try to cover every single case, and it's just not going to work, because you're going to have an instance that it doesn't work for you, right? That this student has some unique characteristics, and we have to figure out how to help them access and have fair and equitable access the best we can. And so if you don't know, don't hesitate to call, and let's go over it and walk through it together. If you think that there might be an exception, or this student might fall outside of the normal, what would normally be in the manual, that never hurts our feelings, and we'd rather have that conversation and get it right than for a student not to have the supports that they're supposed to have. Accommodations for students with IEPs must be recorded in the IEPs and used in daily instruction. That I can't repeat that enough times, right? So you shouldn't be giving students access to accessibility features that they don't typically use. There's really good evidence to show it. If you give students access to tools that they don't know how to use, it will cause more harm than good. So don't give them text to speech just because you think it might be cool. Make sure they're used to having text to speech and they know how to use it. Almost all of those accommodations or accessibility features are tools. They don't do the work for them. And if you don't know how to use those tools, then they're not going to help you on the assessment. So, really consider that as you're doing, working through all of those accessibility features. Do not assume more is better, right? Marking everything on the list means you probably didn't think about that individual student. every time, right? So if all of your IEP students have the same set of things marked every time, that probably says we didn't do enough individual thought about what they need moving forward. And we try not to change the manual during the year, right? So once we put out the manual, it's already out there for the year. Unless there's something that is really wrong, we will try to keep that in place all year long. And then take suggestions for the next year if we need to make changes. Overall, this document has been fairly stable over the last 10 years, hasn't changed a whole lot, but we do try to continually clarify and to add additional information whenever it's appropriate. One thing to note here is that accessibility features, so the federal government wants us to do a better job of tracking accessibility features and who's using those. So we only track a subsection of them. It's not all of them, right? So you can have students that get an accessibility feature or accommodation or English language support, right? But we might not choose to record that because we don't think it's important, just because it's not done very often or it has minimal impacts on the test. And so what we try to do is try to be not overburdensome in what we did, but also be able to track and meet the federal expectations as well. So we track some of those pieces, we don't track others. Yeah, so like we said, you want to report what was used, and questions could be directed to myself, Trudy, or to Sharon if you have questions about accessibility. If we don't know or are unsure, we might go to the rest of the group and check and come back with a response for you. So, you know, sometimes it might take a little longer, but we work really hard to try to be as consistent as possible. Usually in October, fall, we've been doing workshops for any number of years. I'm not sure, we're kind of in a weird spot this year with NSCAS growth already starting and kind of going throughout the year, and whether that makes sense or not. We did decide that we are going to go ahead and do an ACT workshop on October 21st. One thing I'll mention about ACT is that, and you guys probably know this, but we also identify a school level person for ACT. A lot of the work for ACT is done at the school level as opposed to the district level. And so this is often one that gets handed to somebody else. Oftentimes we see a DAC and then maybe a high school counselor that runs the ACT part of it, or a high school principal that runs it. And so this might be where some of those duties are divvied up. Know that we always include DACs no matter what. So we'll send that out to DACs, but also the TCs in many cases when we do that. We try never to leave DACs out of the information as we go. If we do any other fall workshop types things, obviously we'll let everybody know and hope that you can make it. As with just about everything we do, with having 244 DACs, all with different jobs, the likelihood of us ever finding a time or a set of times that works for everybody is obviously almost impossible. So we try to have a couple of different options and then record these so that you can watch them later. I know some people really like to watch them later because they like to be able to stop and pause, look stuff up and those types of things. I know people that prefer to be on the live one because they like to ask the questions. We don't have any preference. We don't track you. We're expecting you to go through and do the stuff that we need you to do. Yeah, leave it there. Last slide here, and then we'll get to some questions here before 1:30 rolls around. A couple of different things just to tell you about. So we have an assessment and accountability advisory group. So we invite different stakeholders different DACs, special education superintendents, teachers, organization membership, so like from the NCSA and those types of things. Overall, it's about 50 people. And oftentimes when we have to make decisions that are not as crystal clear as we would hope they would be, we try to get input on those, right? So not every district is represented, but we try to make sure we have small districts, we have large districts. We often have ESUs people there because they oftentimes are helping small districts, and so they kind of have a different perspective as well. We do that all the time, and we try to do that as much as possible. And whenever they give us a recommendation, we try to follow it. That's not always the case, right? Because sometimes it's against the law. We'll find out that they said, well, we should do this, and I was like, well, I don't want to go to jail, so we're not going to do that anymore. And so, but we try to listen to all of those things. Another group is called the Technical Advisory Group. We have 3 national psychometric experts on this group and 2 Nebraska educators on the group. And they are meant to give us technical feedback about the course and the direction of our assessment program, right? So we meet with them a couple of times a year, tell them what are going on. They give us feedback, and we try to follow what they are advising us to do, whatever that might be about whatever situation we put in front of them. We do lots of surveys. We did lots of surveys last year, it seemed like, within SCAS growth. The other thing is you can always email or call us. If you have feedback, do not hesitate to do that. Sometimes we don't know because we're sitting on this side of the screen instead of that side of the screen, that something's not working well, right? And I never take it personally if something's not working well and we want to figure out if we can make it better, right? Some things are easier said than done, but we don't mind hearing feedback. Okay, so my last 2 things, just to reiterate, and then we'll get into questions. So if we'll answer the ones that are already in there, if we can, or if they haven't been answered. Can't stress it enough. Do not. So we want you to read everything we send out. We know it's a lot. Okay, I will not lie to you. My wife is a principal. Okay, I know how we've been there, and Trudy's been there as a superintendent, right? We know how busy you are and how oftentimes this is the last thing on your schedule because you have to deal with whatever is walking in the door right now, and we get that, right? So we never want you to look, like say, oh, I read this somewhere and take 2 hours to try to find that, right? If you can't find it after a minute or 2, call us and ask us where it's at, or send us an email and ask us where it's at, because your time is way too valuable to spend time looking for that stuff if we can tell you where it is easily, right? And so I don't know how many times people over the years have said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm bothering you and I'm sending you this question. It is no bother. It is 100% not a bother. Yeah, that's what we're here to do. So, that other thing was provide feedback. If you have it, provide the feedback and feel comfortable doing so. Okay, anybody want to help me with catching up?
Yeah. Okay, so Jeremy, one question from earlier that hasn't been responded to yet is, could you provide some insight as to why math students testing at the 81st percentile might be developing?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're looking at a student at the 81st percentile nationally, right? That 81st percentile looks at all the students in the country and says, okay, this is what percentage of students that you're performing at or better than, right? That is a national norm, right? There's always going to be 50% above, always going to be 50% below. when you get developing or on track or advanced, that is based on a criterion description. And teachers met and they looked at that and they said, Nebraska teachers met on that and they said, well, this is where we think that spot should be. And so they said whether that was proficient or not. So you actually have, it is giving you two different results. The test is giving you two different results. One is a normed reference result. One of them is a criterion reference result. And because those two are not determined in the exact same way, you have the risk of there being a disconnect between the two. They are, and this is true, map growth has been highly correlated with any Nebraska state test or for mathematics or for reading for a long time, highly correlated, but they're not exact. And that answer was probably not good enough for you because it's extremely nuanced. One of the things that we've been talking about doing is trying to do a WebEx that says, okay, estimated RIT and percentile, what does this mean? INSCAS, scale score, percentiles, and what do these mean? Because they do mean two different things. In the end, Nebraska teachers set a very high bar for proficiency in the state of Nebraska in 2017 and 2018 when they made a recommendation about what the cut scores should be. And that is the expectation we've lived with ever since that time. Yeah, I really should do like a standard setting 101 thing too, because it would be, yeah. Okay, other questions?
I think we've caught up everything we've been answering. There might be, okay, we got some here. Okay, nope. Anybody want to come off or add more questions? We're caught up, I think, unless you submitted a question and we have an answer, please let us know.
Can I just ask a quick question on the
Sure.
On the upcoming pre-ACT?
Yeah.
Has that ordering already occurred? Did I miss something?
Iris.
Hey, I'm trying to come off mute here. Sorry about that. So pre-ACT for fall is open. The ordering window opens next Tuesday. So if you tried to go in and order with the state contract, you're not able to until they open that window on Tuesday. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Okay, unless we have any other questions, we'll get you out here a little early. This will be recorded and we'll put it up there with the rest of the videos for the new Dac. So if you want to come back and, like I said, watch this later, or just send us a new email or a call, or just ask and let us know.
When do you anticipate the new table of specifications coming out for math?
For math?
Yes.
Yeah, probably not for a while.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we have to do is do an alignment check between the old and the new, and then we have to determine what standards we're going to assess with the INSCAS test, right? And then we have to make a new table of specs after that. So we're almost, so I think later this month or right at the beginning of next month, we'll have the ELA one done. So probably not a new table of specs for math. I don't know, probably spring at the earliest. I think we'll get that one done sooner because it's kind of a new, we're starting that process over again. But One thing we did do first with ELA is we identified the tested standards first before we gave the table of specs, and that really just gave the range of items like 0 to 4 or whatever the case may be that you would typically expect.
For those who asked, September 30th is the expected delivery date for the new table of specs for the ELA standards.
Okay. Well,
Let's wait. Angie, did you get your question answered?
I don't believe so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please ask then.
My question, as you were talking, Jeremy, about percentile ranks, and I understand that one comes from map growth. Will we ever get percentile ranks based on NSCAS growth scores rather than map growth?
yeah,
Like we did with NSCAS and NISA?
yeah, absolutely. So we just sent out the last 2 emails that we sent out had those attached to them.
But they're not on the student report, like they're not on the reports in the system yet?
Like, will it ever be on the student report?
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know that for sure. I definitely think that is a possibility.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Regarding the ISRs, those can go home with students. We don't have to mail.
Yes, you can hand them to students and send them home if you want. If you do that, I do encourage you to let parents know that they're coming home on whatever day that it might be, just so less of them will end up in places they shouldn't. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time today. If you have questions, let us know.